How is the Lethbridge economy doing on the heels of the fourth wave of COVID? Well, joining me to discuss the Southern Alberta economic situation is Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Trevor, welcome back. So great to have you on again.
Thanks so much for having me back. Appreciate it.
Of course. So, Trevor, first of all, with the devastating flood situation that has hit British Columbia so hard, this apparently will affect the supply chain significantly. So what effect will this have on businesses here in Southern Alberta?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, there's been catastrophic damage to homes, entire communities, and infrastructure across a really wide swath of BC. I mean, lives have been lost, livelihoods disrupted. So I know I speak for all Albertans when we say our hearts and thoughts are certainly with our neighbors in British Columbia. But, sigignificantly for us, with both national railways suffering track damage and most of the major highways that connect the lower mainland to the rest of Canada cut off, we can definitely expect some impacts here. There's already been short-term supply chain disruptions. So the Port of Vancouver is the busiest port in Canada. So if you think about raw materials for our local manufacturers or finished goods for the store shelves this Christmas, that inbound freight is either stuck on the water or stuck in the port. And it might be many weeks, even months before that backlog is cleared. So I do think you'll see some reduced selection on store shelves this coming season, and some outages, some other items. And for our producers and manufacturers, of course, they're trying to get their products and services out of Alberta to global markets. And our region, Lethbridge in particular, has seen a steady growth in exports over the last couple of years. And so, we've got this interesting situation where we've got a booming business, an opportunity to export, and no infrastructure to get there. So challenges ahead, but transportation companies are resilient. They're often finding other pathways, and whether it's redirecting through the US or finding another mode of transportation, companies will figure out. It's just a question of delays and more costs. So definitely an impact for us here in Lethbridge.
Yeah, now, thank you so much for mentioning how our hearts are with British Columbia, our neighbors. Of course, it's just so devastating what's happened over there. And it is really interesting to see just that kind of chain of events here. So I'm just wondering now, Trevor, because you mentioned Christmas time, not as many things on the shelves maybe. What are you hearing from local business owners regarding the Christmas season? Are they worried about this? Is it looking like consumers are going to buy locally as well, or not so much maybe?
Yeah, great question. I think there's certainly some expectation and some excitement about the Christmas season. It's typically the busiest part of the retail year. It's when most retailers do, 50 to 60% of their business on average. So the bulk of the year for most retail businesses is during the Christmas season. So it's very, very important. We've seen during the pandemic, community groups like the Chamber of Commerce and others talk about the importance of buying local. Certainly, there's been lots of activity on social media, different awareness campaigns to educate people. And I think genuinely people want to support local. They see the importance of that. And we estimate for that every $1 that's spent in the local economy, it has a multiplier effect of about $7. So every $1 you spend in a locally owned business creates $7 more in our economy. Really important for people to focus on that. The risk, of course, are some of the issues. I think we're going to continue to see the impact of digital shopping, that online shopping, where if you're hesitant to go outside or you're worried about mask mandates, perhaps you'll rely on a delivery service of some sort. And again, those supply chain disruptions, I think we will see some shortages and some cancellations of orders. And so that will have an impact on what's available on the shelf. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, it sure will be, for sure. Now, the fourth wave of COVID seems to be flattening out now. So do we have any numbers on how many Lethbridge businesses have been affected by the latest wave?
Yeah, I think every business has been impacted in some way, whether it's enforcing, masking or implementing the restrictions exemption program. The pandemic has definitely created all kinds of new procedures and considerations for the business community. And I think we're all still learning about what the best way to protect ourselves is as new information is released. Hospitality and tourism has certainly been less impacted this time compared to previous waves. Restaurants, bars, entertainment venues have been able to operate more or less at full capacity when they have vaccination checks and other processes in place. So that's helped reduce the impact there. We have seen some businesses have to, be creative, just as they were during the pandemic, with other options for consumers that are concerned about COVID, whether it's curbside pickup or delivery or some of those other things. Travel has picked up. We've certainly seen borders reopen of late, which is encouraging. Airlines are adding capacity. in-person meetings and conferences. I've been to a few lately, so I think that's helped that particular sector. In terms of the numbers locally, we haven't really seen a change in the number of active businesses. There's really been no decrease or closures that we've noticed. Same number of licenses issued, generally speaking. Haven't seen a major change in either personal or business bankruptcies. So that's the good news. I think the government supports that were put in place have had a positive impact, maybe delayed some of the pain to come in the coming months. But certainly we haven't seen any major impacts on the local business community, from a pure metrics perspective.
What are you hearing from local businesses regarding the vaccine mandates? Are they seeing a decline or an increase in business with this policy in place?
Yeah, again, I think it depends a little bit on what kind of business you are. So restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues, if you think about movie theaters or even Hurricanes hockey at the NMAX, all of those facilities and businesses are grateful, I think, to have the vaccine mandate. It's allowed them to operate at either full or near full capacity versus some of the shutdowns we had in earlier phases of the pandemic. So that's a good news. I have heard from some retailers and some business owners that they have noticed a decline in traffic. Certainly, there are still people that are a little hesitant, perhaps, to be in large crowds or perhaps be out during the busy Christmas season. So, we'll have to monitor that. But I think overall, businesses are pleased with the program and are pleased that they can operate at either near or full capacity.
And how are businesses faring finding workers to fill job vacancies, especially in the areas of retail and restaurants, like you were mentioning?
Yeah, that is the single largest piece of feedback we get from the business community. The challenge of finding, both attracting and retaining skilled workforce. In the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region today, there are approximately 4,600 job vacancies. So those are 4,600 jobs in our region that employers are looking to fill, and there simply aren't people that are able to be hired or that are applying. So that's the big concern. Again, I think as government support programs have wound down in the last month, we may see more people re-enter the workforce as their financial situation changes and those government programs are no longer there. Many employers are getting more creative, offering incentives and signing bonuses and other perks to attract people. But there fundamentally has been a bit of a reset. There's been some popular media conversation around this concept of quote unquote the great resignation. The pandemic has forced us to work from home and perhaps rethink how we work. And so we are seeing people make career changes, perhaps relocating communities, giving serious consideration to what they want out of their career. And I think that's going to have long-term implications for all jobs and all employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard how other communities in southern Alberta are doing regarding all of this as well? Are they doing better or worse than Lethbridge regarding vaccine mandates, trying to fill vacancies left open from the pandemic? What have you? What are you hearing?
Yeah, there's some good news. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So if you think about oil and gas economies, whether that's more of a significant factor like Tabor or Medicine Hat as an example, the increases in prices for oil and natural gas have driven more activity. So those communities have certainly seen an upward swing in employment coming from those sectors. On the downside in the region, our agricultural industries, many of our producers and growers were negatively impacted by the drought over the summer. Yields were down, early harvests resulted in less crops, which is unfortunate because commodity prices were at an all-time high for the most part. So we have seen some of our rural communities negatively impacted by the after effects of drought and the weather. And at the same time, there are still sort of shoots of optimism, I would say. Renewable energy projects, there's a great deal of investment in both solar and wind projects in the region. That's an opportunity for some of our more rural communities to chip in. So again, bit of a mixed bag. There are some wins, there are some challenges, and definitely some bumps ahead on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be interesting to see how that pans out. Now, Trevor, what is your reaction to the upcoming amendments of the Business Corporations Act that the UCP government is proposing? So the UCP claims that the changes will make the province a more competitive and attractive place to do business. But what are your thoughts? Have you had a chance to read the amendments?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Corporate governance doesn't normally excite most people. It's not a topic we see in popular media most of the time. But if you think about the recent story where the Rogers Empire, a family-controlled corporation, big boardroom fight, control of this multi-billion-dollar important national company came down to control and how control was exercised based on BC laws where that company is incorporated. So The Business Corporations Act is not the most exciting read, but certainly it's an important document. It is important for companies in terms of how they're set up, how their boards function. So the UCP government has introduced changes that will modernize that piece of legislation. Some of that is very good news, allowing for digital meetings, allowing for non-written resolutions, which is just a reflection of the modern era and the fact that most things happen in an electronic way, which was not reflected in the legislation. But there are a number of other structural changes that potentially, the way they're being positioned by the government, will be able to attract more corporate investment to Alberta. And so that's the hope, is that by creating more flexibility and structure, by leveraging some of these other tools that are not really available in Canada for corporations, that this will incent some new investment in our province. So again, more to be debated. I think that the bill will make its way through the legislature and sort of the debating process. But I'm interested to see sort of the reaction from the business community and whether they view these changes positively or not.
Switching gears here, so Lethbridge has a new mayor and council. So what are you hearing from business owners? Are they confident in the new leadership team?
Well, every election is an opportunity for change and for renewal. So I think that's the exciting time as we have a new council getting down to work. Certainly many of those new and even some of the returning councillors campaigned on platforms that talked about supporting the business community, creating jobs, the importance of economic development. So right now, council's really only been in place for about 3 weeks since their organizational meeting. They've gone through orientation training. They're going through some learning sessions with all of the different city departments and functions. And the next major piece of work for them is their strategic plan. So they're going to build a document that really sets the tone for the next 4 years. And so when that comes out, I think we'll have a real good sense of what this council stands for and what their priorities are. Certainly, we'll be advocating for a focus on economic development, creating jobs, supporting the business community. And I look forward to working with this new council and kind of hearing their ideas on what those priorities are.
Yeah, it should be exciting for sure. Now, have you heard any news of potential increases in new business ventures in our area?
Well, my team here at Economic Development Lethbridge has been very busy. We're back to pre-pandemic levels of inquiries and activity, so that's great news. Lethbridge is certainly very interesting to a number of international companies. They're interested in the agri-food sectors in particular. We have a strong tech sector here, and of course, some very creative manufacturing companies. So I would say there's definitely momentum and renewed interest in our area. And that's a tribute to our 2 world-class post-secondary institutions, the fact that we have great road access. We're right on the Canamex corridor, north and south. We've got Highway 3 east-west, of course, great rail connections, and of course, recent improvements at the airport. So Lethbridge has all the right ingredients, and we are definitely seeing that increase in interest and inquiries for this region, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, you'd mentioned before how many job vacancies there are left from the pandemic. But Trevor, do you know what the unemployment rate is right now for the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region?
Yeah, so the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region actually has the lowest unemployment rate in the province. We're currently sitting at 5.3%. And for Lethbridge specifically, so when we look at the city of Lethbridge or the census metropolitan area, our unemployment rate is actually 5.2%. And that's the 9th lowest for any census metropolitan area in the country. So we're in pretty good shape. The other major measure that we track is participation rate. And so that's a measure of the number of people in the workforce. And that was actually down last month, which is the first time it's decreased since June. And so when you look at that, the size of our workforce has shrunk a little bit. And last month, we did lose 1,200 jobs. So that's a bit of a concern. Even though we're in good shape and we do have the lowest unemployment rate in the province, we'll continue to keep an eye on that because we want to make sure that people aren't exiting the workforce and that we don't continue to see those job losses.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months?
Yeah, I'm fundamentally optimistic. I really do think we have one of the most diversified economies in the province. We have that depth of talent because of those 2, world-class post-secondary institutions. We've got a wealth of natural resources when it comes to renewable energy, which more and more is a focus around the world for environmental, social, and governance factors, or so-called ESG for corporate governance. Our manufacturers locally have shown growth over the last 2 years in their exports, and that's in the face of a global slowdown and the pandemic. We've still increased exports from our region. I'm a little bit concerned about the risk of inflation. We have seen the largest cost of living increases in the last 2 decades over the last couple of months. food costs, energy costs are certainly on the way up, and that isn't expected to moderate until the back half of next year. So people definitely need to be prepared to pay more in the months to come, and that could slow economic activity a little bit. Additionally, the Bank of Canada has been pretty transparent about their intention to raise interest rates again sometime in the back half of next year. So that will increase the costs of borrowing on things like mortgages and loans. So there are definitely some challenges ahead, and certainly unknown factors if there's a further wave of COVID that impacts our hospitality and entertainment sectors. But for Lethbridge specifically, our region, the fundamentals are very solid. We're in a very good position, and we are still one of the top performing areas in the province. So I remain incredibly optimistic about our prospects.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Trevor. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.